Hello and welcome to Cinema Eclectica, part of the Geek Show podcast network. We are the Geek Show's dedicated movie podcast. I'm your host, Graham, and this week I've been joined by...
Hello, me, Rob. Not that dedicated because we've got one more episode after this.
We're
dedicated.
dedicated.
That sounds really harsh the way I worded it, but...
We were dedicated and now we're committed in a sort of asylum sense.
Yeah, we're sort of readdressing and repacking, I guess, would be the term to all the phraseology to use as far as what we're doing.
But it's all very exciting stuff because this is still going to go on. We're going to have a new movie podcast starting in January called Pop Screen, all about various movies that are either about or starring or even directed by pop stars, rappers, rock stars, anything in that field.
You're letting yourself into a really bad area, including rappers in that, because I believe there's many horror movies starring Snoop Dogg.
Yes, there are.
They're not good.
But yes, if you can't wait till then to hear us struggle to find positive things to say about a straight-to-video Snoop Dogg starring horror movie, we are still here until the end of October. And after that, we'll also be moving this feature that we're about to do right now over to a new Patreon podcast exclusively for our backers on that site.
Yes, a monthly show based around Director's Lottery, which... Yeah, we've got a lot of names on that list, so it feels like a natural conclusion to move it somewhere like that. 270-something?
Something like that, and it is such a strong idea. It's very simple. Every time we do a Director's Lottery show the week before, we pick a random number, we check it against our list, and then we do a film by the director who has that number on the list. And the last time we did it, it came out with Gerard Hertz.
Which isn't bad, all things considered.
I feel like there was an element of fate in the last two we've done. Last week we did Kinji Fukasaku, who is a very you kind of director. And this week we do Gerard Hertz, a kind of me director.
Well, he's kind of one of the discoveries of Eclectica, really, isn't he?
Completely, yeah. That whole Czech and Slovak new wave generation. I think you said last week that part of the story of this podcast over the last 5 years has been me discovering Czech and Slovak new wave, and I do agree. I think that's very true.
Because I'll be honest, I didn't even know them. I had an inkling that they had some sort of movie industry there, but not to the extent that they do. That's been a real joy to find.
I don't think anyone could have predicted that between about 1958 and 1968 there would be like 1 trillion movies made in the former Czechoslovakia and every single one of them would be a masterpiece. That feels like a bit much.
It's like the height of punk cinema.
It is. Hertz, in case you don't know, the guy is most famous for The Cremator, a fabulous, grotesque and intensely frightening film about an ordinary suburban man slowly being radicalised into Nazism.
Yeah, I mean, it has like traditional horror scenes in it, but the scariest part of it is a conversation in a vast sort of gothic dining room. When you realise what he is referring to, it just makes your skin genuinely crawl.
It's the best kind of horror movie where, after all of the visual and audio scares have faded, the ideas will stick with you forever.
It's a doozy, and anybody who says it's like one of their favourite movies, just leave the room.
I mean...
It's a hint.
I mean...
It's a great movie, but to say it was one of your favourite, given what it's all about, wow.
Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't introduce myself that way at a party.
Oh, well, no.
But it is one of my favourite movies.
Oh, no. I've put a foot in mouth there.
No, I do completely understand it. It's a horrible, horrible film, but it's fantastic and completely convincing.
Oh yeah,
We
yeah.
we chose a film he made shortly afterwards in 1972 called Morgiana, which is adapted, as far as I can tell, from that meme of the two offended women pointing at the smug-looking cat.
That's as good. That's as legitimate of an origin of this as you get.
Basically, the plot, isn't it?
My idea was it's basically a Hammer horror remake, but it's got the same actor playing both Vincent Price and Christopher
Yes.
Lee. You know.
Yeah, yeah. And I did not realise that Eva Yanshirova, her name is. I did not realise she was playing the two sisters for so long in
Well,
this film.
well, I watched it. This is the second time I've seen it, and I didn't realize until I talked about it after the fact. When I thought, oh, hang on, which is it's embarrassing to admit, but at the same time, it's never really set up in a way where you'd think, oh, they're the same person.
And I think one of the things is Czech and Slovak New Wave is a very heavily edited style. There are some films, I guess, that have more of an art house long take aesthetic, but when I think of it, I do think of like very high speed editing. So the fact that Clara and Victoria are rarely in the same frame, which in any other film starring, twins or siblings would be a massive red flag that these people are played by the same actor and they couldn't afford much split screen. But in Morgiana, it just looks like part of the natural style of this movement.
Oh yeah. I mean, we should explain what it is. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
I guess it's sort of early 20th century. It takes place, given some of the cues that it sets up.
Hmm.
We have two sisters, and the first scene is after a funeral,
Yeah.
which I think another sister has died. So it's like a triplet situation going on
It's.
here.
Is it? I
Well, in the
might have
subtitles
missed
that I
that.
had, they said it was
Right.
another burying another sister. So maybe I have
It,
bad subtitles, but
it's probably right. I assumed it was their father, but there is so much in this film that I think you can easily miss
oh
big
yeah.
details like that.
But essentially, one sister is given like the estate, the keys to the estate. She's loved by
Hmm.
everybody. She's very friendly, very outgoing. And we have the other character who's played by Vincent Price, basically, who's the same version of that character. But well, she wears darker dresses. She's much grimmer in outlook and jealous,
Hmm.
very, very jealous. So after a visit to a tarot card reading, which is, if that was a tarot card reading, I'd be very concerned because the things that she basically said, you got to go ahead and do this to get rid of the problems in your life.
Yes.
You're on the wrong side of the law here, tarot card reader. But essentially, it all comes down to one of the sisters poisoning the other, and the paranoia and the gothic horror that results and comes from that.
And it's quite weird because the poisoning plot line occurs within it's sort of set up within the first 10 minutes. This is not a slow burn study of insanity like The Cremator was. This is a
Oh
film
no.
where everyone is up at 11 from the very first frame.
And when the drug sort of, or the poison or whatever it is takes effect, it's like she's been injected with pure Czech New Wave because it's clear what Peter Strickland got an influence from here.
Yes, completely, because he is a big fan of this film.
It shows because the sort of schizophrenic colour and cutting and jarring dreamscapes is what happens. I mean, that's not a big part of it, but whenever it spends time with the poison sister, that's kind of what happens. She goes a bit off the deep end.
And it is. It looks like the only thing I can compare it to is when you are looking at an old 3D image, the type that you used to have red and blue glasses for,
Yeah.
but you don't have the glasses. So there's a red image and a blue image, and they're very slightly out of sync. And it's an effect, I don't know what it is, but it's an effect I'd seen before in one of the great texts of the Czech New Wave, which is Viva Katilova's Daisies. So
Yeah.
Vob is right. It is like being poisoned just gives you access to the Czech New Wave dimension.
It's worse dimensions. It's much
True,
worse.
it's true.
A big elephant in the room, though, is I mean, it's a period movie. If this was English, lots of nice hats, manners, this sort of thing.
Yeah.
The men in this are pretty much period accurate, as far as I could tell.
They have an element where you could drop them into an adaptation of Middlemarch or something and they wouldn't look out of place.
The women, though, I think maybe Rocky Horror Picture Show, a bit of glam, lots of
Yes.
disco, but also big dresses.
There is a comparison on the back cover of the second run DVD, which I watched this on, that compares it to Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, which feels like a very, very good point of comparison indeed.
But it kind of creates its own space, doesn't it? With this little off-key thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's being satirical, but with it being Czech, I'm sure it is in some way that I never picked up on.
Well, I think there is this element in some of the Czech and Slovak films from this time where they are about the feel of a period as much as they are about actually getting into it. There are some films made in Czechoslovakia around this time, like All My Good Countrymen, which are proper historical films that do the research and, have accurate costumes and sets and everything. But there are also some, like František Vasil's Valley of the Bees, which is set in a kind of medievally place. And it doesn't matter, because the fact that you can't pin it to one definite era actually helps give it the feeling of a kind of fable or fairy tale, which is what this is so invested in, I think.
There's another, I think it's Hungarian, another second run title, Electra something. It's just on the tip of my tongue.
Yes, Electra, my love.
Yeah, which is exactly like that one's more of a dance movie as opposed to this being gothic horror, I guess.
Yeah, I'd go for that. I think the difference with Electra, My Love, which I think is a very good movie as well, is that when Electra, My Love has an anachronism, I'm not going to spoil it if you haven't seen it, listeners, but when Electra, My Love has an anachronistic element, oh boy, you notice it. It's not subtle.
It goes full whack, that movie. It's not subtle about its metaphors.
Whereas this is kind of, you look at it and you don't know whether this is an item of fashion from the past that you just haven't seen before, or whether this is completely fabricated, and then you realise that it doesn't matter, I think.
Well, they got like silver eyeliner on and purple lipstick, and they've drawn lines around the lipstick. It's very 1970s in style. There's no evade in that.
I'll put it this way, if RuPaul's Drag Race had been invented sometime around the Edwardian era, it would look a bit like this.
Well, there's a challenge episode, I guess. But it's really interesting in the sense of how it gets away with so much visually. You mentioned it, kind of referencing it. It's got such an evil little turd of a cat. I don't know whether where they found this, but it's just the look on its face, the scowl on its face.
Yes.
And it also cuts the sort of shots from its perspective.
Yeah.
On numerous occasions.
These are beautifully arranged. Like the camera jumps up onto a chair, then jumps up onto a table, and you can see the exact movement of a cat in it. I think Hertz just likes his puns, really, because in the cremator there is a fisheye lens shot of an actual fish's eye. And
okay. Yeah, maybe.
This is like a cat's eye viewpoint, a literal cat's eye shot.
Well, can't really argue with that, to be honest.
It is adapted from a book I'm not familiar with, but it's a book by someone who has, I think, the best name for a gothic horror author. He's called Alexander Grin.
Yeah, that's very close to being just perfect.
Yeah, hard to beat that. The thing that it kept reminding me of is Edgar Allan Poe's The Black Cat, which we've covered several
Oh, yeah.
various adaptations of on the Geek Show and on this show as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not overly familiar with, but the adaptations that we have done, I might be on
Mm.
the nail on the head here, or I might just be stating the obvious for people who've read it. But the cat is the source of all evil, and the cat is provoking people with its evilness.
Mm, yeah, yeah.
It could be read very easily that way because, well, yeah, you just look at the cat. Seriously,
It's a mean little cat.
there was a cat called Satan in my Your Voice is a Locked Room and Only I Have the Key. I think the long title,
Yes.
I can't remember the name. It was called Satan.
Yeah.
That cat is less evil than this, and
Yeah.
that one was called
Completely.
Satan. You know, That's, it says quite a lot. One thing though, I think it's at its best on the bookends.
Yeah.
It kind of loses steam a little bit in the middle, I think.
I think there's a certain amount of truth to that because I was going to say there's so much plot to this, but in fact the core situation stays remarkably the same. It is about one sister trying to poison the other. It's just that it manages to run so many variations on that
Yeah.
it can feel a bit exhausting in the middle.
Yeah, and also there's a sense of surrealness beyond the visuals where
Mm,
there's certain instances, I'll try to talk around this as much as I can, but there's certain instances where you think, hang on, did that happen?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
there's a scene at the cliffs
Mm,
which has a very direct way of saying, right, that character's dead now,
yeah.
but they're not. So, did that scene happen? I'm unsure as to what's happening here.
I think that there is this constant flow of beach and clifftop imagery in it, and sometimes it is a dream, and sometimes it turns out to be a premonition, and there's it seems to be inserted to create that kind of slippage between the real world and the dream world that if you like your movies to have very sharp delineating lines between those two things, this will be a problem for you. If, on the other hand, you're a big David Lynch fan, hi there, it won't be.
Oh, it didn't concern me in any way. It's just I forgot about it entirely.
Yeah, yeah,
Because it also plays into the fact that there's many instances, especially in the drug-fueled haze,
yeah.
where or poison-fueled haze, whatever, I don't know. It suggests that there's a very blurred line between which sister is which.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
There's a few confusing sequences. I think the red-headed version says, "Oh, you look a lot like me. Do you want to be my sister?" I think
Mm,
is a direct quote there, which again it seeds this real confusion into what's happening with the character. Even the doctor at one point, I think, what has he said? Are you sure you're not smoking hashish?
yeah, yes, the Doctor's great.
What sort of doctor says that?
I mean, all he has to be is more professional than the tarot reader, and he's won in this world. But yeah, I think that is part of what Hertz is going for, that kind of persona quality of identity slipping. And I think that's why he's cast the same actress as both sisters, because it's not like they're twins, and it's not even like there's any sort of Shakespeare comedy style business where they get mistaken for each other or anything like that. They are cast this way purely to make a point about identity, I think.
Yeah, I mean the performance is distinct enough that they don't feel like the same person. The way she's
Yeah.
expressing herself, tone of voice is very, very different. It could easily be confused into thinking it's two separate actors, like I was.
Yeah, completely.
But yeah, it does go for some interesting things, and I don't want to like outright say this, but I'll just say this in as vague a sense possible. But whoa, that's a stonker of a bleak ending.
It really is. Yes, horrible stuff.
That's the most direct terms I can address that on.
So this is the third film by Hertz I've seen. In between this and The Cremator, I saw a fairly minor TV project he did. Sweet Games of Late Summer, I think it was called. I saw it largely because it was an adaptation of a Gilles de Maupassant story that I'm very fond of. And it doesn't quite work, but it doesn't work because I think Juraj Hertz is an actively insane choice to make a film about a sort of light, sexy summertime romance. I think that is like, why not get Richard Curtis to do a slasher movie while you're at it? It just doesn't work.
Oh, that's a terrible thought. But he's not thought of as one of the sort of the Mount Rushmore of Czech New Wave, really.
No, I don't think so. And I think there are two reasons for this. Because, I mean, first off, I think that's unjust. I think at his best, he's as good as anyone in the movement.
Oh, yeah, but he's accessibility is a major issue. I mean, largely it's only Morgiana and the Cremator which have really had any sort of release or any sort of reception. Beyond that, he's properly difficult and obscure to find this stuff for.
And this is a guy who made about 40 films, so there's plenty that could be brought up and reissued, but it's not happening. And I think partly it's just that The Cremator is such a landmark that it kind of overshadows everything else. But I also think Hertz is kind of an odd one because he doesn't quite fit into the boxes of Czech and Slovak new wave directors. Because after the country parted and became Czechia as it is now and Slovakia, a lot of the big name directors were reclassified as Czech because they were from Prague or some other Czech territory. And you know, Vera Kyselova is Czech, Jan Nemek is Czech, Miloš Forman is Czech. The Slovak directors of a really interesting bunch who deserve more attention, but they are always overshadowed. And Hertz also was ethnically Slovak, but he worked most of the time in Prague, even weirdly at a time when, after the Soviet invasion of 1968, a lot of Czech directors were fleeing for the Slovakian territories because they were less rigorously policed. But Hertz, for some reason, liked working in Czechia. So he doesn't quite fit into the national categories for these films that we have now, although I will say, in terms of character, the thing about Slovak films, there was that massive documentary that Second Run released earlier this year, Checkmate, in search of Jiri Menzel. And there's a bit in that where Agnieszka Holland says the Czech directors are very kind of flippant and ironic and urban, and the Slovak directors are very dark and sincere and rural. And I think that's fair, and that's a categorisation where you can point at Hertz and say, yes, he feels Slovak. But the other thing is, every time I watch a Slovak movie, I keep expecting to answer the phone and this little Japanese girl's going to tell me I've got a week to live. I genuinely feel like I've been hexed by something. These are movies with some seriously dark juju.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's very hard to find a film which feels genuinely dangerous. I mean, a lot of these movies were for political reasons, because they weren't just poking the bear; they were knocking on the bear's front door, getting right up in the bear's
flaming
business.
Bag of excrement on its doorstep, and then running away.
I don't think it even ran away; it was just waiting. So it's all right then. So what are you going to do about it then? Huh?
Yes.
There's a real sense of danger to it. I don't think that danger is here, at least not in a perceptible way without having the full historical context. You've got a lot more of that than I have. admittedly, but I think it's one of these rare occasions. Sometimes there's these movies where you need that context for you to actually be able to understand what the blue hell is going on.
Yes, yeah.
Valerie and A Week of Wonders is a major one. Once you have a context of that one, you can feel that movie a lot more than you can without it.
Yeah.
I'm assuming Markita Lazarova is like that as well, because that has a reputation for people who are new to Czech for it being kind of abstract and a bit off.
Yeah.
But this one, I don't think you need it, really. It's about as straight and direct a Czech New Wave film as you're likely to get. And honestly, it feels a bit of an odd phrase to say, but as far as entry point to this style, this wouldn't be your worst bet.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. And something that's just occurred to me as I've sort of turned that over is that this, on the one hand, has all of the gothic themes and darkness of the Slovak movies, of things like, Birds, Orphans and Fools or Dragon's Return. But it also has some of the kind of colourful, ironic qualities of the Czech movies. So in many ways, this is the ultimate Czechoslovak movie. It is not Czech, it is not Slovak, it is properly Czechoslovakian in a way that I'm not sure I've seen before.
Yeah, and it's really interesting.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it a little more on the second viewing. And it's already a really cracking movie as it is.
Petting her, petting her, petting her, petting her, stop petting her.
Do we have any recommendations to go with it?
It's a difficult one, really, but there's only one which I could think of, and I can't think of anything else because of it.
Yeah.
Yorgos Lanthimos is the favourite.
Oh man, you stole mine.
Honestly, it's the only. It's almost too perfect a fit. They are brothers from another mother, these two movies.
Now, the thing is, the favourite plays very fast and loose with history as well, and one of the bits that I know does not have a historical basis is the bit where Rachel Weisz's character is poisoned and ends up being rescued and taken into a brothel. And that feels like a combination of at least two different scenes from Morgiana. So I'm absolutely dead certain that Yorgos Lanthimos watched this while he was developing The Favourite.
Oh yeah, I mean, without a doubt. But yeah, it's if you want like a really wacky alternative afternoon of period movies which give the finger to period movies.
Yes.
This is about as perfect a double bill as you really can get.
And if you like big fisheye lenses, big massive fisheye lenses,
I'll win.
So, as we said earlier, we are going to relaunch this show in the new year as a Director's Lottery based podcast, which will be accessible through Patreon. And if you're interested in getting in on the ground floor of that and getting our exclusive thoughts on other new movies that are coming out and the best movies for 2020, because some movies did manage to come out this year. It did happen.
It's a select group. It's almost interesting fact though. Next year's Oscars would be really interesting.
Oh God, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be Bill and Ted Face the Music.
Yes.
But yes, if you're interested in hearing all that, you can donate to our Patreon at www.patreon.com/The Geek Show. You can also find our website where we review all sorts of films at thegeekshow.co.uk. We are on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, each time at TGS_The Geek Show.
Perplexed by the pompous, ponderous piffle purveyed by normal art critics? Well, you've come to the right place, because we're not normal. We take a not-so-serious look at the serious worlds of art and literature. Join Sarah, Andrew, Rob and Graham for a piffle-free journey through the cultural landscape of the 21st century. Literary loitering. Because you can't make a cultural omelette without smashing a few eggheads.
This is Hunt Emerson. I'm a cartoonist. I draw comics. And I'm having a great time here in Sunderland at the Graphic Novel Expo. and I'm happy to be talking to you here on The Geek Show.
So, if you do go over to thegeekshow.co.uk, you can read some of our exclusive reviews of films that we don't review on the show, or in this case, films that Rob was bewildered and delighted by about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I have a review of Criterion UK's new reissue of David Lynch's debut feature, Eraserhead.
I'm not sure how you review a movie like Eraserhead. So I don't think it really allows you to.
It's an experience, isn't it?
Yeah, it's sensory. It's from a guy who came from like painting and art and like mad dreamscapes and hellscapes and industrial nightmares. It's just, and he hates his kid apparently. But there's all sorts of like things just circling in that movie.
Yes, yeah. The edition is great though, and I was particularly delighted to see a lot of his early short films included as extras, which, I mean, most of which I have seen only as cruddy quality YouTube rips, so it's fantastic to finally have a proper Blu-ray edition of them.
Might check that one out. Yeah, it's a great movie. You'll never forget it. Not a date movie, I'll just say that much.
It's not a date movie, and you should also not do what I did once and lend it to someone who hung on to it for a bit and then came to me beaming and said that her and her boyfriend had just conceived.
Wow.
At which point I thought, well, I know you're excited to watch it, but can I take that copy of Eraserhead back from you before you do something you're going to regret?
Yeah, well, if you give birth to some sort of... Well, I don't even know how you describe the baby in Eraserhead.
Weird blob fetus duck thing.
And you have a flirtatious relationship with the woman in the radiator, but... I don't know.
Yeah, could be a vital how-to guide, yes.
Yeah.
Petting her, petting her, petting her, petting her, stop petting her.
New stuff. We have new stuff. Yeah, the first one I'm doing is a French, Canadian, Italian gangster movie called Mafia, Inc. And
It's quite a mix of nationalities there.
yeah, I mean, one thing before starting this, it really bugs me how you've got like a dual nationality movie, and they'll just flip from speaking in English and then they'll suddenly speak in French or Spanish or Italian or whatever. I don't think people in these countries speak like that. It's just such a weird movieism.
See, I object to it just because it makes me feel dumb, to be honest, but...
Yeah, it just doesn't feel real. I mean, it's not a
Yeah.
thing exclusive to this one. It's in all of these movies, to be honest. But yeah, this one, Mafia Inc. Law, is by Daniel, I don't know if I pronounce this right, Grou, Grou.
Oh, right, so not the character from Despicable Me.
Oh, no. Grou,
Grau, yeah, that feels right. Yeah.
who's credited as Pods, so I'm assuming there's something there. Maybe it's
That's
the
very odd.
Canadian McG. I don't know. I have no context to this.
Maybe, yes.
But anyhow, this is a 2.5 hour-ish gangster epic about the Paterno family. Whew. Now, if I was going to plot this out, I would be giving... I'd be getting confused, frankly, because there's a lot going on like there tends to be in a lot of gangster movies. But we have the Paternos who want to go straight, and to go straight they're building a bridge, a bridge that wanted to build for a long time, and anybody in Italy, as he says in a monologue, says they've always wanted to have a bridge from Sicily to Italy.
Right.
There's also a young part of the family who's collecting 180 million from contacts that they have, like gangster contacts. They usually have their fingers in a lot of pies. He is withholding money, and that's being represented by a person who was taken under the Paderno's wing, and he's a bit of a psychopath, as they have a tendency to these movies. That seems to be a very common thing in modern gangster movies, where they'll have one person who's a bit violent and a bit stabby, and the system
and I think that's a cliche as old as Jimmy Cagney, really, isn't it?
Oh yeah, going all the way back to White Heat and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And well, there's just lots going on. There's lots of sub-arcs and conflicts and stuff like this. But fundamentally, it's about how somebody who was taken under the wing of a family gets too violent, so the family excommunicate him, and it starts a gang war.
Yeah.
That's what it's about. And honestly, the movie as an exercise in telling a story, a well-worn story about gang tropes, about gang affiliations. There's parts of it where they talk about how they make deals with certain other groups to make more money, like percentages and cuts.
Yeah.
And there's also the other aspect of the gang movie, which is the grisly violence. Lots of it taking place in a meat factory. Some implied violence there, some quite obviously direct. There's the obligatory scene in a gangster movie where the young Bolshy one walks into a boardroom and throws his weight around and everybody else leaves. And just beats him up, says, "Tell you what I want to hear." No, that's not right. And then hits and hits and hits. There's these like sort of ideas and tropes of what a gang movie should contain. It has all of that. And honestly, I'm not like overly familiar with gangland cinema, because I found them to be sort of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other in a lot of occasions.
Yeah, I mean, you've got your areas of expertise. We were talking about the Yakuza films last week, and that's something that you do know a fair bit about.
They tend to present Yakuzas as hopeless romantics, violent but hopeless romantic people. Which isn't really true, but you know,
it's good for movies.
Yeah. In this one, the gang aspect of it is the least interesting aspect of it. Mafia Inc., despite what its title might suggest, it's treating the gangland movie as a business movie, which isn't really true. But Mafia Inc. is at its best and its most interesting when it's using the family mechanics of what makes these things tick. In particular, I guess he'd be mainly the lead role, but there's so many people that it's kind of hard to pick on it. But an actor called Marc-Andre Grondin, I'm not great with pronunciations, he plays a character called Vincent, who's the angry one. And it's the conflict of his character where the movie is at its best. He's violent. He's horrifically violent. Quite a lot of the occasions, but about an hour in, it'll flip back to 10 years ago. I mean, this is set in like 1994, so it's periods, but the period stuff only really comes through in the choice of music. It's not like it's a 90s movie, so we're going to have them all wearing
shell suits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully Canada wasn't like us in that regard, but yeah, it's a bit more subtle than that. But after that hour mark, it starts painting the Vincent character as a human, and it goes back into his past about his fractious relationship with his family.
Yeah.
And when it's talking about his father, who's as the leader of the gang, what was he there? The godfather of Canadian Mafia, he's referred to as. He refers to Vincent's dad as a master tailor. So these are two worlds which are very, very conflicted with one another.
Yeah.
When it addresses that conflict, when it addresses conflict between Vincent and his family, Vincent and his history, Vincent and the fact that he doesn't belong in this gangland empire, really, so he sort of overcompensates with his violence, then the movie's at its most interesting.
Yeah.
But that's not enough of it, really. It's like these small moments of really pure and honest drama drowned out by 101 gangster mechanics.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the problems that gangster movies have, is that the genre is now split in half, where you can make a good gangster movie if it's like, City of God or a Scorsese film and it's based very closely on things that happened. Or you can make a good gangster movie if it's like Tokyo Drifter and it's just this outrageous kind of pop surrealist thing. There seems to be very little place in the middle, which is dangerous for a genre.
Honestly, I think The Sopranos are to blame for it. Because
that burnt up so much territory.
Yeah, the parts in between, the stuff about the gangs vying for territory, vying for sort of profit and wanting to make all these ploys, it does feel like sort of the Canadian cousins to The Sopranos.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel cinematic, it feels televisual.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's interesting enough. There is a few little bits where I think the technique's a bit weird. Where it'll just have a shot of a character staring at the camera. I mean, it's not set up as being a fourth wall breaking thing, he's just staring at the camera.
Yeah.
It's like a moody shot or something, I don't know, it doesn't really work.
Yeah.
And the final shot is just terrible. There's a scene in a cemetery, and it'll have one of the female characters just walk off and stare at the grass, and then it'll cut to finish. It's like, what? That's
yeah, that is odd.
Maybe cut that like 30-second shot off, and it makes sense, because that's just alienating and weird. And you want to think maybe it's hopeless for the hero in quotation marks, or maybe it's inevitable what's going to happen to him, rather than there's a character staring at the grass. But it's interesting. It's the sort of thing which VOD is filled with, and it's a shame, really, because the good aspects of this, the strong aspects of the characters in this, are kind of lost in the mix. They're lost in the mix of there being hundreds of movies on VOD every bloody week, lost in the mix of there being way too many gangster movies, and those thoughtful character moments, I think, deserve a little bit better than being drowned out in the noise. That's the problem with VOD, honestly, though, isn't it? It's just
yeah, and we're gonna have to get used to it, because I can't see it ever changing. I think cinema now is going to be like television or literature, where there is just this constant flow of new stuff, and there you go, that's it.
And all the horrible horror movies, I will always watch them, even though I know they're bad for me. Good one this week, though, from Jim Cummings, who's a bit of an emerging talent.
Right.
Yeah. The Wolf of Snowy Hollow, I think it was called. I enjoyed that one.
Okay.
A rare VOD horror movie where I can actually recommend it.
Yes, that's never happened before. Well, not often.
Jim Cummings, who did Thunder Road, if the name's sounding familiar.
Yeah, I did. I remember that. I never saw Thunder Road, but it did get very good reviews, not least for his performance.
Oh, he's excellent. He's a really good actor, yeah. I think somebody needs to check on him, though. He might be really, really down, because his movie characters... Oh. But anyway, enough of that. Onwards and upwards to Graham. What have you got?
Yeah, I've got something that comes out on Friday. I think it's on VOD, but I think there will also be a limited cinema release, even though it is a documentary. They do not get wide enough cinema releases at the best of times, and things obviously now are not great for the theatrical exhibition sector. But, if you're interested in it, does come on at Univa Cinema. It is worth going and supporting your local art house. We've always held. But this is a documentary called Helmut Newton, The Bad and the Beautiful, by Gero von Bohm. And my knowledge of Helmut Newton before I sat down to watch this was pretty limited. I'd seen some of his fashion photography. I thought it was, proficient. Certainly, technically you can't fault it. It's always beautifully lit and composed. Fashion photography is not really my thing, so my main thought about his life and career was just going, Helmut.
Helmut Berger is my favourite Helmut.
That's a good Helmut.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's my insight level. And for the first sort of 20 or 30 minutes to this, I thought, this is really going to rub me up the wrong way, because Helmut Newton seems to have inaugurated that trend in fashion photography where your models should always be wearing as few clothes as possible, preferably none at all, which I think is kind of counterintuitive to the whole point of fashion photography myself.
Of course, that sort
Yeah.
of thing originated in mainland Europe.
Yes. Yeah.
Them people and clothes.
It's a very, yeah, maybe it's just a kind of German naturist beach thing. I would love to see Helmut Newton take a picture of that German naturist who had a wild boar steal his laptop a few months back. I think that would have been his ultimate subject.
Test his abilities right there.
Yeah. So I was kind of sceptical, and it doesn't help that some of the talking heads, people like Anna Wintour, who proves to be as full of it as she always is. There's a great cut, which I suspect, I feel like it has to be deliberate satire because it's too good to be accidental, where Winter says a Helmut Newton woman is always very strong, and it cuts to a Newton picture of a naked woman lying on the floor with her ass stuck up in the air, and you think, yeah, she could win a tank battle right there.
A great measure of strength there.
But, and here's the thing, it also has interviews with his models, a lot of which, in fact, I'd go as far as to say all of which, are really enlightening and revealing. So some people in it who were professional, full-time models who I wasn't that familiar with, but some people who were photographed by him have other careers, like usual best thing about any film she appears in, Isabella Rossellini. Who is great. Newton did some photos of her with David Lynch around the time of Blue Velvet, and Rossellini says, I did sort of look at those pictures and think, oh, it's like the artist and his muse. I'm very dull-like, I'm very passive in them. And I thought, okay, I wasn't expecting anyone to admit that. But it does set up that this film is more interested in exploring the criticisms of Newton's work than I think you would expect from something which, let's face it, is aimed at fans. It's not a bad thing. Any biographical documentary about a famous artist is aimed at fans.
There have been some interesting documentaries in that space in the past 5 years.
Yeah. I mean, the one I always think of in terms of ability to persuade is Matthew Akers' documentary The Artist is Present about Marina Abramovich. Now,
Yeah, I remember that one.
I was a bit familiar with Abramovich before I saw it, but I wouldn't describe myself as a fan. After that documentary, I would describe myself as an obsessive. It's far beyond fandom now. So I think that documentary does the work, and although I think Newton's photography will never be exactly my kind of thing, it did help me appreciate not just the technical ability, which I could also see, but also the emotional side of it. And I think one of the barriers I have is that there are a lot of people saying, oh, he was a rebel, an outsider, a maverick. Newton himself says, I don't think good taste should have anything to do with art. I hate good taste. And you think, yeah, but you're employed by Vogue. So,
Yeah.
I could kind of appreciate that if he was some scuzzy underground photographer like Richard Kern or someone. But I think when you were asked to model shoot the new Bulgari collection for Vogue, you kind of lose your ability to say, I'm an embattled outsider.
Yeah, it's a very good point.
Yeah. But I think that, whatever I think about it, Newton really did mean this. And in the second half of the film, where it starts to go into his personal history, it is legitimately fascinating. Because he was born in Weimar, Germany, and of course you can see that kind of celebration of decadence and liberty that Weimar Germany is always associated with all over his work. He went on the run from the Nazis. He stayed in a lot of people's houses who were willing to give shelter to runaways. He says that, some of them were Germans who were party members and yet who saw no contradiction between housing people who were escaping the regime, and it taught him a lot about how oblivious people can be to the crimes that are being done in their name. There is a fascinating observation from, again, Isabella Rossellini, isn't she good? Who says that Helmut Newton shoots women like Leni Riefenstahl shoots men. I just thought that is such a great observation, because the problem with Nazi art, if you've ever seen any like sculptures by Arno Brecker, films by Leni Riefenstahl, is that they aim to celebrate, the pinnacle of Aryan perfection, and yet they are so superficial. They're all about sort of bodies. They're all about posing. When you see someone's face, they're always staring ahead nobly into the distance rather than giving you any sense of a personality. And obviously, when you take that into the realm of modelling, that's less of a problem, because it's not aiming to be this grand national art that tells us who we are as a people. It's aimed to tell you that this brand of clothes is really good.
Bit of a difference, yeah.
Yeah. But I think there is also something quite profound in the idea of a refugee from Nazi Germany actually taking on and subverting a Nazi style and making it into a celebration of this kind of world that the Nazis swept away. I mean, there is an element to which you could say that is very misguided, that the fascist style was chosen because it expresses the ideas of fascism, it expresses the cult of action above thought, but I think there was a part of Newton, even if it was slightly subconscious, that wanted to corrupt those images, that looked at Riefenstahl and thought that, that is some beautiful image making, that is some technical skill. I want to mess that up. I want to, make that into something, a celebration of freedom rather than what it is. And I thought that was great. My other favourite interviewee, who is less insightful but infinitely more entertaining, is Grace Jones.
Need you say no anymore?
I mean, as ever, is just Grace Jones. She did this amazing photo shoot with Newton where it was criticised because on the one that was chosen for a magazine cover rather than the inside one had her with a chain around her, and people said, hang on, that's beyond the sort of bondage chic that fashion was into at the time. You've got a black woman in chains, that has a whole other resonance that you're not dealing with. And Jones addresses this in inimitable style by saying, oh no, it wasn't like that. I mean, I've tied up guys before, white guys, big white guys too. But I thought, oh God, never ever change.
I don't doubt any word that she said there.
It's just spectacular. But I think that the second half of it is what I keep going back to, because when it delves into his family history and when it delves into the illnesses that plagued his later life, his heart conditions, I think it gave me an understanding for the man that I do not see in his work. And I was grateful for that, because I think the next time I do see his work, perhaps I will see some glimmer of it. But one thing that should be noted as we go out, despite my feeling that several of his images are, and I won't flinch from using this word because I think it's true, I think they are misogynistic. And there is an archive TV clip of Susan Sontag, no less, accusing him of the exact same thing. I do think that these were fantasies. I think he is not, by all accounts, a sort of Terry Richardson figure who used transgressive image to actually assault or harass or even just make uncomfortable the models that worked with him. Everyone says that he was a perfect gentleman, that he was always very open and honest about what he wanted to do. He was very good at putting people at their ease. And I think, okay, maybe this guy is like the fashion photography equivalent of someone who we talk about on this show, one of those messed up sweeties like David Cronenberg or Shinya Sakamoto, who just happen to be lovely, decent, respectful guys whose art is full of really dark taboo stuff. Maybe that's it.
Maybe.
So yeah, I think if you're a Helmut Newton fan, this is everything you'd want. And if you're not, as with me, I think you may find it persuasive in ways that you didn't expect it to. And that's Helmut Newton, The Bad and the Beautiful, which is out on streaming and hopefully at some cinemas from Friday.
That's kind of the perfect review of a art documentary, really. Because you say the word art documentary to somebody and you'll see the eyes white over.
Yeah,
yes. They really couldn't care less.
Yeah.
But they're just so much more than what's on the face value of them.
Yeah.
Which I don't think other documentaries really do, except those rare occasions where one thing starts as documentary A and then evolves to documentary B midway through serendipity.
Yeah, like a kind of capturing the Freedmans thing.
Yeah. There was another one about cycling, which turned into about the Russian doping scandal. I can't remember the name of that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's such a weird form. It's more than just art history documentary, which it does sound boring on the face of it.
Yeah, and I think one of the pleasures of an art history documentary is that it is such a niche area, and there is frankly scandalously little of it on television compared to what there used to be, that everyone who makes a film like this knows that they have to argue for their subject and explain their subject, because you can't just depend on people who are already fans of, say, Ai Weiwei or Marina Abramovich to make this a hit. You have to win people over.
Petting her, petting her, petting her. Stop petting her.
Out on Friday, we've actually got quite an interesting slate of releases. The big thing is a film that's been bouncing around the release schedule for a bit, and I'm pleased to see that they're holding firm with it coming out now. It's Mark Munden's adaptation of the classic children's novel The Secret Garden.
Oh, that's been done so many times.
It's been done a lot of times. It's always kind of worth a revisit, I think. This has a nice cast: Colin Firth, Julie Walters, and let's see if I can get this name right, Dixie Eggerchick, who... puzzling collection of consonants, but a very good actress who I recently saw in that Gemma Arterton film Summerland, and she was very good in that. We've also got Pixie, a new Irish crime comedy by Barnaby Thompson with Olivia Cooke. Alec Baldwin as a gun-toting Catholic priest, which, gotta admit, that's...
Yeah, Irish comedy is so consistent.
Yeah.
I mean, on paper, that sounds awful, but you watch it, and I know Mark Kermode gets wailed on a lot, but one thing which he says, which I think is pretty spot on as far as, do I like a comedy, don't I like a comedy? The 6 laugh test.
Yes, yeah.
Irish comedy just makes that look easy. It does that in the first 5 minutes.
Completely, yeah. And this has Dylan Moran in it too, in the supporting cast, and I always love a bit of Dylan Moran. I
think he's just having a bad time of things, Dylan Moran.
He's been having a bad time of things for like about a quarter of a century now, hasn't he?
Yeah. Just find a comb, Dylan, and just have a nice walk.
There's a new film by a director who I thought was the absolute tits back in the 2000s. I have not been so keen on some of his recent work, but Mubi recently had a season of his early films, and it reminded me how much I loved them. But it's Francois Ozon. It's his new film Summer of '85, which has been talked up in some quarters as this year's Call Me By Your Name. And yeah, I will always give Francois Ozon another chance. I think at his best, he's great.
And that is it's French if this is incredibly French. I cocked that
He's
sentence up.
stupendously French.
But yes, what I
yeah.
meant to say, he's very, very French. Swimming pool is probably his most famous, I guess. That was height of his fame, yeah.
And that is pretty French, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of his I like as well, so yeah.
It's a good film that I watched in the recent movie season. I watched Under the Sand for the first time, and that's a cracking film. It might well be, I think, Charlotte Rampling's best performance. She is great in it.
There was one a few years ago. Oh, I can't remember what it's called now. He's so productive.
The one that turned me off a bit, I think, was Double Lover, which I thought was really naff.
I think it was the one before that. Last one which I caught.
Was it The New Girlfriend?
Not sure. I remember it was about somebody writing a book, and there's a green poster, and it's really vague. But
it's one of his many films about people going mad while writing a book, but in a sexy way.
Yes, yeah, that's remarkably accurate for what he done.
Yeah.
In the House, that was the one. In the House.
Oh, I love In the House. I think that's great.
It wasn't for me, that one, but
Fair enough.
It's fair enough.
There's Cordelia, and another new Gothic-themed movie directed by Adrian Shergold and starring Johnny Flynn, Antonia Campbell-Hughes, is it? Or one of those triple-named women, and Michael Gambon, who I love.
Yeah. He's great, just for the stories of when he was on the I can't remember what movie it was, the press circuit, where he just started making things up. Like completely fabricated things. Just because he was bored in the sort of the press junkets.
That's excellent. Enough respect for that. There's a documentary about the American political columnist Molly Ivins called Simply Raise Hell, which she did, and Lord knows if there's ever a time when you've looked out at the world and thought, I wonder what Molly Ivins would make of this. It is probably now, really, isn't it?
Yes.
And finally, 2020 has stopped a lot of things, but it cannot keep Liam Neeson from doing Liam Neeson stuff. The Honest Thief is released on Friday.
He's such a weird guy who became an action star when he turned 60. I really don't...
It's so bizarre, isn't it? Yeah.
Because before that, he was in thoughtful dramas. Like, he was in Schindler's List, Black Sunday, I think he was in.
I'm sure he
Black
is
Friday,
the only major action star who has played Alfred Kinsey. Yes. Like, that's one in a category of one, isn't it?
Yes.
You don't get that sort of stuff with Jean-Claude Van Damme.
I mean, he's a great actor. It's just those movies don't give him that opportunity.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and it's why it was so nice seeing him crop up a couple of years back in stuff like Widows and The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, where he gets a chance to stretch a bit again.
In his action vein, I think The Grey was the last time he really got that muscle stretched.
Yeah, The Grey is good. Yeah, thank you for reminding me of The Grey. So yeah, all of that, but our next show and our last episode, before we move to Patreon, will be a Halloween special, and we have the simplest and nicest idea for it, don't we?
Yes, and it's also the worst idea I could have had, because the idea is favourite horror movie. And
there you go.
I've got to decide what my favourite horror movie is now. I've got like a list of about 15 that I could be a favourite on any given day.
All right, so it's Midsommar, Daniel Isn't Real. What else have you got on the list?
That'd be a hell of an episode. The Banana Splits movie, I loved that as well.
It.
Clearly,
yeah.
No, seriously. If I can save anybody from anything in this run, don't watch the Banana Splits movie. Whatever you do, it might look funny. Just run for the hills. Save yourself.
And on that piece of solid life advice, that's been your lot from Cinema Eclectica for another week. I've been Graham.
And I've been Rob.
And we'll see you next week with our Halloween special.